All right, let's get to work.
She was the ultimate dumb blonde who had a 163 IQ.
It ain't smart, mister, to play me for a sucker.
A drama queen with a gift for comedy, and a Hollywood sex symbol who was too hot to handle.
Jayne Mansfield was a real sensation.
She had everything, but she didn't have what she wanted.
I know what you want.
From platinum playmate
Right here, darling.
to doting mother, Jayne Mansfield lived many lives in just 34 years.
And that kind of publicity you can't even buy.
During the 1950s and 60s, she was the toast of Broadway, a Hollywood diva, and Las Vegas's biggest headliner.
She wasn't afraid to flaunt it. I mean, I'll say that for her.
But in a life that was equal parts glamour and tragedy, her greatest role during her two-decade fight for stardom was playing the part of Jayne Mansfield.
Simple, huh?
From the day she was born on April 19th, 1933, Vera Jane Palmer was larger than life, tipping the scales at nearly 10 pounds. Her mother, Vera, was a former school teacher. Her father, Herbert, an attorney with a promising political future. His death from a heart attack when Jayne was just 3 left a shattering void in his daughter's life. It also intensified her growing need for attention. Beautiful and bright, Jayne showed a flair for drama. She was a talented pianist and gave impromptu violin concerts in the driveway of her mother and stepfather's home in Dallas, Texas.
Jayne played the violin. She read Shakespeare. She was not the village idiot. As a matter of fact, she made village idiots out of those who supposed such.
But Jayne's great passion growing up was for movies. As a child, she grew obsessed with the idea of becoming a star. Soon, she began to look the part. At 8, Jayne's chest began to develop. By her teens, as her bust expanded to 40 inches, the gorgeous brunette found the attention she craved from members of the opposite sex.
Jayne learned that the best way to attract men was through her sexuality. Her mother wanted to fasten her down in the Chinese fashion, and there was no, I mean, Jayne was busting out all over, and all the strapping in the world wasn't going to stop that.
At 16, Jayne lost her virginity to a man 8 years older. Weeks later, the anxious teenager was sure she was pregnant with nowhere to turn, until a college student named Paul Mansfield came to her rescue.
She was a senior in high school. I was a sophomore in college. And I guess it was, I don't know whether it was love at first sight, but we married soon after that.
The pregnancy was a false alarm, but by the spring of 1950, Jayne was expecting a child. She was only 17 when their daughter, Jayne Marie, was born.
Well, my mother was an only child, so she wanted lots and lots of children. She was loving, very caring, adored animals, and we had a menagerie.
She certainly loved Jayne Marie, and Jayne Marie brought a lot of happiness to both of us.
But Paul Mansfield knew there was another overpowering desire in Jayne's life.
She told me soon after we met that someday she'd be going to Hollywood and would become a movie star. And she said it in a way that I believed her.
The 19-year-old's hunger for fame became a source of tension with Paul, especially after the outbreak of the Korean War. Jayne and her family traveled to Camp Gordon, Georgia, where Paul trained to be sent overseas.
She and Jayne Marie had to find something to do, so they'd go swimming at the officers' club, or sometimes they'd just spread a blanket out beside the barracks.
Well, she liked to wear as little as the law would allow, and some major or colonel's wife got wind of it and put a stop to it. The men loved her and the women hated her.
Jayne wasn't shy about showing her body to strangers. In 1951, after Paul was sent to Korea, the voluptuous 19-year-old made some extra money posing nude for a Dallas photographer. It was a potentially scandalous act, but Jayne already knew that her astounding figure would be her ticket to fame. She was hungry to go west to Hollywood, and after Paul's return from Korea, Jayne convinced her husband to move the family to Los Angeles.
We bought a little home in the San Fernando Valley, and within a couple of weeks, she was out calling on the studios.
To announce her arrival, the buxom brunette went platinum blonde.
One of the Los Angeles papers got her on the front page of an inside section one time in a polka dot swimsuit. That helped her, and little by little, she began to be noticed.
But Jayne's obsession with her career left little time for marriage, and after 4 years together, she and Paul agreed to separate.
I didn't feel at home in the movie business. I couldn't see myself being a Mr. Jayne Mansfield for the rest of my life.
He tried to back her on it for a while, but it wasn't his thing. So he was out of the picture, and then there was just me and her.
I think she was a good mother. She was very careful with Janie Marie. She had schedules, just like a lot of mothers do, and she had it pretty much together.
She tried to make it as normal as possible as far as the loving went, and always having me around her, and so there was a close bond there, especially when I was younger.
By 1953, America was re-examining its attitude toward sex. The Kinsey Report and newly founded Playboy magazine were just two of the cultural explosions shaking post-war America. 21-year-old Jayne was determined to be the next one. And in 1955, she crashed a Florida press junket for the Jane Russell movie Underwater. In full view of the press, Jayne accidentally lost her top in the pool.
Jane Russell might as well have been riding in the back of the bus, I can tell you, because it was all up front, Jayne Mansfield.
By the time she returned to Hollywood, even movie studios were asking, who was Jayne Mansfield? And on February 8, 1955, the blonde bombshell gave the papers a double shot of show business gossip. She signed a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers and filed for divorce the same day. Jayne decided to keep the name Mansfield. She said it sounded like a star. Now under contract at a major movie studio, 21-year-old Jayne Mansfield wasted no time in climbing up the Hollywood ladder. The $250 a week player eagerly posed for an endless series of product endorsements and magazine shoots. Her timing was perfect. In the 1950s, everything seemed larger than life, from cars to movies to movie stars. And Jayne's breathtaking body type was just what American males wanted.
She represented something to all the men who came back from the war, that this was their American ideal. Jayne Mansfield and Marilyn Monroe and Gina Lollobrigida and Sophia Loren were busty, voluptuous, over-endowed women, and that held for the 50s.
In 1955, Jayne made her screen debut in the Warner Brothers crime drama Illegal, starring Edward G. Robinson. But her role was small, and so were follow-up parts in B pictures like Hell on Frisco Bay and Pete Kelly's Blues. Jayne bitterly realized that Warner's didn't see her as star material and decided it was time to move on.
She was a very smart woman. She had street smarts, too, which I think is unusual.
In 1956, Jayne hired several top Hollywood management figures to help kickstart her career. They wrangled her the lead in a Columbia Pictures feature, The Burglar.
Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie. That's his name, Charlie.
Really? Tell me about him.
He likes me. He likes me very much.
He's a cop.
Director Paul Wendkos soon realized there was more to Jayne than her dazzling physical dimensions.
She was not a dumb blonde. She knew her lines, knew the background of the scene, understood what we were striving to achieve. Those are not the manifestations of a dumb blonde.
During production, Jayne's managers were busy strategizing her next move. Mansfield was encouraged to emulate an earlier Hollywood blonde, Betty Grable, who gained movie industry respect by starring on Broadway. The stage comedy Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, starring Walter Matthau, was a raucous satire of Madison Avenue hype. Its lead female character was an over-the-top Hollywood bombshell, a part that seemed tailor-made for Jayne.
She walked in there, she just wiggled in, and the producers said they told everybody else to go home.
From the moment the curtain rose, revealing Jayne in just a towel, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter was a smash. It ran for 444 performances, and Mansfield, the new toast of Broadway, won rave reviews. The 23-year-old made sure she was photographed everywhere. During a visit to New York's Latin Quarter, she even upstaged legendary sex siren Mae West, who was starring in a club act. That night, Jayne also caught the eye of one of West's on-stage muscle men. His name was Mickey Hargitay.
I see a blonde girl with the milkshake with some other people were sitting. It's immediately I had eye contact with her. It's a love at first sight.
Hargitay was a former Mr. Universe who dreamed of movie stardom. He was also married, but his instant attraction to Jayne was overwhelming.
They met each other, and it was boom, 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 boom. It was Jayne and Tarzan. They were just attracted like magnets, and of course it precipitated a big fight with Mae West and Mickey.
I think her ego taken over, and rather than embrace the relationship what we had, she was against it.
West called a press conference in which Mickey was to renounce Jayne publicly. Instead, he used the opportunity to propose his love to her before getting decked by one of West's bodyguards. Meanwhile, as Mickey filed for divorce, Jayne's dream team of managers used her stage success in Rock Hunter as leverage for bigger movie roles. The result was an exclusive contract at 20th Century Fox. In Jayne, the studio saw not only a potential sex symbol, but also an insurance policy against their #1 actress, the increasingly temperamental Marilyn Monroe.
Jayne Mansfield found ways to do her own variation on Marilyn Monroe and did it very successfully. And I think that's why 20th Century Fox put her under contract. Historically, Fox and other studios like to do that. If they're having problems with their #1 star, they would look for a backup, somebody they could use in films as an alternative. Monroe managed to project her kitten-like quality with a sexuality that also was clearly vulnerable. Clearly vulnerable on the screen, clearly vulnerable in real life. Mansfield managed to project something a little more calculated, a little tougher, and more of a put-on.
Mansfield found herself working 18 hours a day, leaving less time than ever to see the daughter she adored. But young Jayne Marie already understood that she would have to share her mother with the public.
I could tell you countless times of when we stopped to sign autographs, and it was all genuine, and hold the babies, and it wasn't politics. It was genuinely her love, you know, of the public, and she always made herself accessible.
She spread warmth. I mean, it was like pouring honey across the table. She just knew how to relate to people because she never lost the feeling inside of her that I know you're all looking for something, and so am I.
And I would like to be thought of as an actress with a soul, an actress with a very human quality, rather than a model.
20th Century Fox pulled out all the stops for her first picture at the studio. The Girl Can't Help It was directed by Frank Tashlin, who used his past experience as a Warner Brothers animator to turn Jayne Mansfield into an outrageous human cartoon.
The girl can't help it. The girl can't help it. Man, oh, Mansfield. Jayne Mansfield, that is.
the terrific star of Rock Hunter, in her first rocking role on the screen.
The Girl Can't Help It opened in 1956, just as rock and roll was exploding onto America's jukeboxes. But it was Jayne's incendiary sex appeal that turned the movie into one of the biggest hits of the year.
So you can start working on me.
Honey, this is no place to start.
Oh, I've been in men's bedrooms before. I grew up with 7 brothers and a father. Besides, you're half-dressed already.
Jayne's character mimicked real life as she played Jerry Jordan, a seemingly dumb blonde manipulated by the media.
You got 6 weeks to have her a star.
You know, the first thing... 6 weeks? Oh, easy, Fats. It takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day.
She ain't Rome. What we're talking about is already built.
I just absolutely adore that movie because through the whole movie you're thinking she is this dumb person, you know, sex symbol, and at the end she really shows that she was playing that part.
With The Girl Can't Help It, Jayne Mansfield emerged as more than just an eye-catching publicity seeker. She had earned Hollywood's respect as a box office star.
I must tell you that the other night I went to see your new picture, the Girl Can't Help It.
That's right.
And I thought not only the picture was good, but you were absolutely wonderful in it.
Thank you very much. How did you like my leading man, Tom Ewell?
Tom Ewell? Well, I thought he was good, you know. Although I felt that the part called for someone, say, a little more mature, a little more sophisticated. You know, a little more, well, you know what I mean.
I not only know what you mean, I know whom.
The Girl Can't Help It was a huge step forward for 23-year-old Jayne Mansfield. And 20th Century Fox had the perfect follow-up, a film based on her Broadway smash, Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter?
Leave and walk out on all this publicity?
As movie star Rita Marlowe, opposite Tony Randall, Jayne again won raves for her sharp comic timing and over-the-top sex appeal.
Miss Marlowe, I'm Rockwell Hunter.
Oh, Rock Huntington. I know so kissable, but why don't you pour the champagne first, lover doll?
It's Hunter, not Huntington.
Shh, how can I remember? I'm all excited because you're loving me up.
Jayne felt she'd earned the right to have a say in casting. She insisted that the man she loved, Mickey Hargitay, play her on-screen boyfriend.
My makeup won't stay on. Even my hairpiece is coming loose.
Jayne was at a career peak. She had the celebrity she craved, a family she loved, and with 2 back-to-back hits, her dream of outshining Marilyn Monroe no longer seemed a fantasy.
They used Jayne to say, well, we've got Jayne, got another blonde hair with bigger breasts. I don't think that Marilyn was real happy about Jayne. That's my feeling.
In 1957, Jayne tackled her most challenging role to date in a film of John Steinbeck's novel, The Wayward Bus. As a hard-bitten call girl with dreams of marriage, Jayne gave a subtle performance that earned her good reviews.
I grew up in Salinas.
Wish I'd known you then. I missed a lot of stops along the way.
You don't know me at all, Ernest. You don't know anything about me.
I don't have to know any more about you. Everything I said, I meant.
Did you really?
You doubt the word of a traveling salesman?
Jayne was rewarded with a co-starring role opposite one of Hollywood's biggest stars, Cary Grant, in the comedy Kiss Them For Me.
Now, what would you like to do on your leave? What kind of a girl are you looking for?
I'll tell you, sweetie. I'm looking for a girl who doesn't smoke, drink, or have any bad habits.
What for?
But off-screen, Mickey Hargitay was the man in Jayne's life. And in January 1958, the two married in Palos Verdes, California. It was supposed to be a small affair.
She says, honey, I don't want just 100 people, 100 invitations. That's all I'm gonna send out. She had no idea that 100 invitations is going to turn out to be thousands. You won't believe it. I almost didn't make my wedding. The crowd was so heavy.
We came out of the chapel and there were thousands of people and press, and kind of like you'd see at Madonna's wedding now or something like that.
The Hollywood sex queen and her husband moved into a 3-acre Spanish-style mansion that Jayne turned into a pink palace.
Everything was pink. I mean, the pink doilies and the pink curtains and the pink everything. Powder pink. She even made my room pink. I didn't want it pink, but everything was pink.
Jayne's account manager saw nothing but red when he looked at the price tag, $76,000.
That's when we went to Las Vegas, shortly after. 3 weeks' salary, a house was paid for.
Jayne made her nightclub debut at the lavish new Tropicana Hotel in Las Vegas. The Tropicana paid her $25,000 a week, 10 times her salary at 20th Century Fox.
Las Vegas was very lucrative and was the greatest show she did. Financially and stabilized her being Broadway, being Las Vegas, being singing, being a movie star. So she had everything going.
Jayne also pushed the envelope by making annual authorized appearances in the pages of Playboy magazine.
She did a semi-nude pictorial for us with Fox's approval. And that was the first time that we'd ever had that kind of relationship directly with a studio. And it became almost an annual event. Every February we would do a follow-up on her career for the next 4 or 5 years.
But by 1958, 20th Century Fox was beginning to see their star of 3 years as a diva whose lifestyle and spending seemed out of control.
In some respects, she was very thrifty, and she got that from her mother, I think. On the other side, it was like, I gotta have that, 20-foot chandelier.
Say, Jayne, you've been crowned Queen of Uranium, Miss Peanut Butter and Jelly, Miss Bluebonnet Belle of Texas, and amongst other things, I think you were once crowned Queen of Stalled Crosstown Traffic.
Oh, my.
Now, of all your honors, which title do you cherish the most?
You know which title I like?
No,
I like to be called Mother.
Touche, dear.
In December of 1958, the maternal movie star proudly gave birth to a son, Mickey Hargitay Jr. But Jayne's movie career was far less happy, as her dealings with 20th Century Fox became more contentious.
She wanted dramatic roles, and she felt that roles that she wanted went to other actresses, and she said, look, I'm very unhappy. That's when they started sending her to Europe and to England. She did pictures that did not show her off to the best of her abilities.
Why, you dirty, yellow-livered snakes. You're hunting them down in pairs now, huh? Well, let me tell you something. You'll be toting no guns in my place. If you don't want to play by house rules, you get. The both of you. Hit the trail. Get!
To Jayne's frustration, her next pictures were second-rate and mostly commercial failures. Fox didn't seem to mind. The studio was getting $250,000 every time they loaned Jayne out, while she received only her contract salary. When the Hargitays returned to the States, it wasn't Jayne's movies, but her latest pregnancy that made news. In August of 1960, Jayne gave birth to a second son, Zoltan.
She had babies and more babies. And then she would squeeze in a movie someplace and come back and then have another baby. I mean, I don't know how she did it.
A month later, 27-year-old Jayne was back in Europe, loaned out for another mediocre film. She was convinced that Fox was trying to sabotage her career. The actress knew that her days at the studio were numbered, but Jayne Mansfield was determined to do anything to stay in the media spotlight.
Who wants to be called?
By 1960, 27-year-old Jayne Mansfield knew her career was sliding. She was now seen in Hollywood not as a successor to Marilyn Monroe, but as a cheaper cartoon version of Marilyn. Jayne didn't help matters by doing almost anything to get publicity. And when a real crisis hit her life, few believed her. In 1962, while on vacation in the Bahamas, Jayne and Mickey were stranded on an island after a near-fatal boating accident. For 2 days, the couple was presumed dead.
It was terrible. She was knocked out. She was in the water. I couldn't find her. I dived under. Somehow I find her and put her on a capsized boat top. And we survived.
February 7th, actually, and 8th, down in the Bahamas, it was reported that you and your husband, Mickey, were missing overnight in shark-infested waters. The press took a look at it as though it was just another publicity stunt because you were involved in it. I said, this is not a fake. No one can look the way Jayne looks and the way Mickey looks here and do this just for publicity. Now, you can understand, though, why you were suspect, can't you?
If I had twin babies, people would think it was for a publicity stunt. I never thought in my life, after having gone through what we went through down there, that anyone could doubt it being true. I even don't like to discuss it. It was to the wonderful help of the dear Lord that we were saved.
Insecure over her status as an aging sex goddess, Jayne buried her pain in alcohol and extramarital affairs. One night, Jayne's husband returned to their suite and discovered his wife with not one, but 2 men. Despite the transgression, Mickey decided to forgive Jayne.
I couldn't help her because I'm a great believer. Everybody have to help herself into a degree. I can tell her things. It's not necessary that she would listen or to do it.
In 1962, Jayne was dropped by 20th Century Fox, and that same year brought shocking news. Marilyn Monroe was dead.
Marilyn passed. It was not fun. It was downhill from then on. After that, it was over. The blondes were over.
Marilyn's death signaled the end of an era for blonde bombshells in Hollywood. And although Jayne tried to fill Marilyn's shoes, even having a brief affair with President John F. Kennedy, her own career seemed increasingly irrelevant. In 1963, Jayne returned to the pages of Playboy, this time for a photo spread more explicit than any she'd done before.
We published a pictorial on Jayne Mansfield, and a couple of cops arrived and with an arrest warrant for me and took me down and booked me, and I actually went to trial.
That pictorial that was put in that magazine at that time was extremely controversial because it was considered way too risque for that period. Today it would be nothing, but then it was. She would put herself out there, whatever it would take to get known.
Mansfield made a more desperate bid for attention with her next film. The low-budget comedy Promises, Promises co-starred Mickey Hargitay and Tommy Noonan, Marilyn Monroe's former co-star in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
But I suggest you park the kiddies at the nearest cartoon movie and run. Do not walk to this theater to see Promises, Promises.
You're trying too hard, darling. It's not necessary.
Promises, Promises was a critical disaster, grabbing headlines only for Jayne's on-screen nudity. A movie first for an American screen star. The situation again drew comparisons to Marilyn Monroe, who had planned to appear nude in her final, unfinished film, Something's Gotta Give. Many critics thought Promises, Promises also would have been better left unfinished.
And she did the film what I truly believe she should not done. I think that was a turning point.
Jayne was now taking diet pills to control her weight. Like alcohol, they became an addiction. She returned to the stage, but her days of headlining in Las Vegas were behind her. Her latest offer came from a North Carolina supper club. Her act was little more than a striptease, which she called a satire. But through it all, there was one constant: Mickey Hargitay.
He was the backbone for her. He was able to be there for her in really difficult times.
I don't look at her as a movie star. I looked at her as my wife, who I love.
After a series of affairs, Jayne returned to her long-suffering husband, and in January of 1964, Jayne gave birth to a fourth child, a daughter named Mariska.
Mickey had a strength that Jayne needed in a man, and it was almost like lover-father. You know, Mickey was Hungarian, very strong, old European, and that appealed to Jayne. That was stability.
My mother always felt she could depend on Mickey. He was pretty much the only father figure I had in my life.
Jayne Mansfield had struggled to balance the two great passions in her life, her career and her children. She was especially close to her daughter, Jayne Marie, who was becoming a young woman.
Having 8 years difference till the next one was born, you know, kind of fixated that closeness. I was her only child for a while, and then became her, like, best friend, confidant, you name it. I kind of played the role.
But by 1964, the 31-year-old star was losing control. She was now addicted to drugs and alcohol. Ignored by Hollywood, Jayne found work starring in regional stage productions of Bus Stop and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. The films of both plays had starred Marilyn Monroe. And just as Marilyn had married playwright Arthur Miller, Jayne began an affair with her director on Bus Stop, an Italian named Thomas Ottaviano, who worked under the name Matt Cimber.
She said, "I'm in love with another man, and I'm going to marry this man." I couldn't believe it, but as I heard the words, I said, "Well, that's what you want. That's what you should do."
Jayne and Mickey's tortured 6-year marriage was finally over. Hargitay received $70,000 in the divorce. Jayne kept the Pink Palace and got full custody of the children. Mansfield and Matt Cimber married in Mexico. But even before she'd returned home, the 31-year-old knew the marriage was a mistake. There was a darker side to their relationship as well. On stage, Jayne's body showed bruises that no makeup could conceal.
And she would have problems with Matt, would call Mickey, and, you know, things get stirred up, and you've got too many people involved.
If you really love somebody, you're always going to love this person. I loved her, but I was powerless. I couldn't do anything. She was married to another man.
Frightened of the future, Jayne became more self-destructive. After months of drinking and pills that now included LSD, she was barely recognizable as the beautiful star of a decade earlier. Addiction also twisted her instincts as a loving mother. Her relationship with Jayne Marie underwent a nightmarish reversal.
We had intercoms through the whole house, of which she was very quickly to get on and, you know, scream my name, "Jayne Marie, come here, Jayne Marie, come here." But I would water down the liquor and get rid of the pills and do whatever I could to try to keep her away from it.
Jayne dreamed that a major motion picture would rescue her career. She refused smaller offers, including the role of Ginger on the new sitcom Gilligan's Island.
Jayne said, "I'm a movie star. What I want to do television for." See, it was always being the movie star.
In 1965, Jayne and Matt Cimber announced that Mansfield was pregnant with her 5th child. Motherhood gave her the strength to stop drinking, at least long enough to give birth to a healthy boy, Antonio. But within months, Jayne gave in to her addictions. She also filed for divorce. To win custody of her youngest son, she turned to powerful attorney Sam Brody, who became Mansfield's next lover.
He was one of the attorneys in the Ruby case in Dallas. And so he came from a big law firm in Beverly Hills. He was married, had children, and he met Jayne, and he just went bananas over Jayne.
Brody was willing to do anything to help Jayne keep her son. He even bullied her 16-year-old daughter.
I was asked to lie, and I did it under coercion and then recanted my statements because I came to a crossroads in my life at 16 that I had to do what I felt was right in my heart, even if she was my mother or not, and I chose to do what was right in my heart.
Jayne won custody of her newborn child, but her mental health spiraled further, worsened by her abusive relationship with Sam Brody.
When they drank together, it was poison. And Jayne hit him, he hit her back.
As an actress, Jayne was now offered nothing but softcore exploitation films, like 1966's The Las Vegas Hillbillies, co-starring another sex kitten, Mamie Van Doren.
A country boy from Tennessee inherits a beat-up nightclub in Las Vegas and finds that not one, but two blonde bombshells go along with the mortgage. Jayne Mansfield. Wow. And Mamie Van Doren. Pow. The Las Vegas Hillbillies.
I know we both did it for the money. It wasn't that much in those days. She was trying to survive, and she had a family, and I guess she just couldn't take rejection.
Jayne's options were few and growing fewer.
A guide for the married man. Would you believe all of these technical advisors give the do's and don'ts for the married man with an urge to stray?
In 1967, Jayne Mansfield returned to 20th Century Fox for a rare appearance in an A-list feature, the all-star sex comedy, A Guide for the Married Man.
What you looking for, sweetie?
My bra.
Can't find it. Sure you were wearing one?
What kind of a girl do you think I am? Of course I was.
Getting light.
Maybe I better go without it.
What? Are you crazy?
It's all right, Taco. I've got another one at home.
Look, that is not what's worrying me. What is worrying me is my wife coming home and finding it.
She'll just think it's hers.
Don't be ridiculous.
It would be a brief return to the Hollywood mainstream. Jayne had become a tragic caricature of her once vibrant and intelligent self. Now 34, she managed to find work in England, performing live in rural taverns, coal yards, and docks, wherever she could find an audience.
My act was quite tongue-in-cheek, satirical, and nothing offensive whatsoever.
When she returned to America, Mansfield's once happy relationship with her daughter, Jayne Marie, hit rock bottom. In a violent rage, Sam Brody beat the 16-year-old girl so brutally, it made headlines.
Jayne was drunk, and Jayne kept saying, beat her more, beat her more, beat her like you beat me. And Jayne Marie ran off, and the police came, and she went to live with her aunt and uncle.
I filed charges the next day, and I wasn't yet 18, and I was asking that the children be taken away. It was a terrible mess and a heartbreaking moment for me and her.
But the case would never come to trial. The judge granted a continuance so that Jayne could fulfill a club engagement in Biloxi, Mississippi. Joining her on the trip were Sam Brody and the 3 Hargitay children. After Jayne's performance on June 28, 1967, the group packed up for a late-night drive to New Orleans, where Jayne was to appear on television the next morning. It was Mickey who spoke to her last, by phone.
We had a very sweet, very loving, very kind conversation. She said to me, the last thing I heard, honey, the kid's gonna be asleep. Don't worry about it. I'll put him in the back seat. I'll talk to you later. I gotta go. That was the end.
With their 20-year-old chauffeur behind the wheel, the party headed west toward New Orleans shortly after midnight. Jayne and Sam sat in front. 30 miles outside the city, they entered a winding stretch of road. Visibility was poor. Ahead of them, an insecticide truck was fogging the area for mosquitoes. A trailer truck behind it slowed down. Then, in an instant, it was over. At 2:25 a.m. on June 29, 1967, Jayne's car slammed into the back of the truck at nearly 80 miles per hour. All three passengers in front, Jayne, Sam, and the driver, were killed instantly. Jayne Mansfield was 34 years old. As word spread the following day, fans and friends reacted with sorrow and disbelief. A false report circulated that Jayne had been decapitated.
I looked out the window and I saw Monsignor from the Catholic Church walking up, and right as he hit the door, my aunt handed me a newspaper. And the headlines were Jayne Mansfield decapitated, which isn't really what happened, but that's the way I found out.
Miraculously, all three children in the car emerged without serious injury. Mickey was awarded full custody, while Jayne Marie lived with relatives on her father's side. Jayne's youngest child, Tony, remained with his father, Matt Simber. It was only because of litigation over Jayne's divorce that the infant was not with her at the time of the crash.
I have to look back at that as God's way of making what's supposed to happen happen.
Jayne Mansfield's most cherished dream was to become a star who would never be forgotten. In the end, she got her wish. Today, her fame lives on, in the success of her best films, in the legend of her lifestyle, and in the career of her daughter, actress Mariska Hargitay. Jayne would certainly have approved.
Jayne came along at the time when a lot of movie stars were trying to be the girl next door. Jayne says boys in the country don't care less about the girl next door when they go to the movies. They want to see something bigger than life. And she says, and take a look at me.
Jayne did not have a bad bone in her body. I mean, she loved kids, she loved men, she loved flaunting herself. That was part of her.
To this day, I hear from women, I think almost more than I hear from men, how much they admire Jayne Mansfield. They remember her as a very smart, loving, intelligent woman who cared a lot about her family, about people. And she was taken very young, but she gave a lot while she was here.